The views and opinions expressed on the Pier 6 Roundtable are those of the hosts, guests and callers, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, its management, other hosts or underwriters. Listen at your own risk.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our main event of the evening. A Pier 6 brawl with a 1-hour time limit. And now, here is the undisputed, true voice of pro wrestling in New England, the Pier 6 Wrestling Roundtable.
Wonderful!
You listen to me, you go to the top. Don't listen to me, you're never heard from again.
Ha ha! Delete! Delete!
Oh my.
Delete! Oh, kiss your boots if you can do it! But to be the man, you gotta beat the man!
And what's he gonna do when Hulkamania and the largest arms in the world destroy you?
Using this word jabroni, and it's awesome.
Woo! Anyway, you're tuned to 101.1 FM, WBRU LP Providence, BSRlive.com, serving the curious listener, Brown Student Community Radio. The show is the Pier 6 Wrestling Roundtable, and man, the computer was slow this morning, and I'm slow this morning.
The mercy of technology.
The only thing not slow is our guest today, who had coffee after an 8-year hiatus.
18-year hiatus.
So he's going to be shot out of a cannon today, which will make for a great show. I should start doing the rapid fire. I'm just going to throw names out, and he has to react to it.
That's not a good idea.
That's my favorite part.
We could totally have a great show quickly.
There's no swearing here, right?
No. It'd be one of our most listened to. What the hell did Drew say about me? Anyway, you're tuned to the Pier 6 Roundtable. You can catch us online, facebook.com/Pier6WR. Follow us on Twitter at Pier6WR. So in studio, as usual, the high class one, the outlaw, the king of all zebras.
Yeah.
Rich Bass in studio. Have you heard the king of all zebras?
I haven't.
That was one.
That's a new one.
I did not give myself.
No.
I love it.
No, that was a month ago, maybe. I said you were king of all zebras, and you said so. That's the newest moniker.
That's a T-shirt.
I know. That's what I said.
That's what we. Yeah. So the other voice you're hearing is one of the premier trainers in New England wrestling. He was a professional wrestler for quite some time, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But right now, we've talked about his program and where he trains guys on the South Coast. H2O Ryan Waters, Ryan Drew, the head trainer at the Top Rope Promotions Lockup program. He's our guest. We're going to talk about his wrestling career. We're going to talk about his program over there in Fall River and some of the names that you as fans of wrestling have heard of for sure. There's only some who are legit world champions right now. So
Right.
No big deal.
No, NBD, yeah. So we'll definitely talk about all of that in the upcoming show. It's been kind of a crazy week for me. I'm been burning the candle at both ends, trying to get between. I've talked about my album that I'm working on, finally got it out to press, so that's going on. But
that's par for the course for you, Matt.
It's been like that.
You're always burning the candle.
It's been like that,
ends.
yeah. For once, it's not. It's not about wrestling that I'm burning my candle at both ends, but it's funny because I went Rich had taken care of having Ryan booked for the show. We were going to do that last week. Then we had that Providence snow, their parking ban, and it's we all come from out of the center of the city, so getting into the station would have been a problem. So Ryan was actually, as we had said a couple weeks ago, our guest for last week. Got snowed out, but then we ended up seeing each other later that night at a show in Randolph. We had been talking about the New England All-Star Wrestling show that was going to happen, and it did happen, and it was a fun show. And some of Ryan's students were on the show. Yep. One in particular, Nico Silva,
the Rhode Island Lion.
The Rhode Island Lion, yep, from Johnston, Rhode Island.
Johnston and Newport.
And he wrestled another Rhode Island native in the Revolution, Chris Venom, and they were really the opening match pretty much. There was a tag match that sort of opened things up and was sort of just kind of broke down quickly as Rex Lawless destroyed everybody involved. But Nico and Chris Venom showing why they're two of the best, technical wrestlers in the area. It was a really solid match. So
solid.
It was good. And I hadn't seen Nico in I've seen video of him. That's probably the first time I've seen him wrestle live. And
Okay.
He's only been wrestling for how many years now? And
This June will be his 3rd year.
so 3 years of him wrestling, and this is the first time I've caught him live.
Yeah.
So
Seems like
shows
so
how
much
little I
more.
get around. Yeah. No, I've been hearing the name forever, and I've seen his stuff, online. And
Well, do you remember Joe Chichi?
yeah,
That's who he reminds me of.
Yeah.
yeah,
In
yeah.
many different ways.
Yep.
He's got all the natural ability and talent and looks and the body. He just kind of lacks that the sacrifice it takes to make it in wrestling and really getting yourself out there.
Gotcha.
So that's how he kind of reminds me of Joe.
Right. Well, Joe was, it's funny you brought him up. He was one of those guys we'd all pegged like, this kid's got it. And,
Absolutely.
And he ended up being part of that crew of guys who went down to Ohio Valley.
Yep.
And like, a bunch of them moved back
Yep.
after that. And then he was like never the same after that.
No,
Like,
he moved back first.
He was the first one. He
Yeah.
missed home, and then I think it seemed to me like, and I could be completely off target on this. He must have at some point in that like gotten a head injury and not like really registered it, because he came back and it seemed like every match he had once he moved back, he gets sick and or had like some level of like dizziness. Or
No, he had a maybe an esophagus hernia or something, like
Okay.
a hernia. So he was throwing up before that. Just it would be random. I guess
Okay.
depends on the match. So maybe it had gotten worse or whatever. But from what I heard, it was more personal that
'cause
kept him away from
I
wrestling.
had heard like he had health issues, and it just seemed like the way, just from what we see in wrestling, like when somebody all of a sudden starts having like they get back, it's like, wow, I bet you this guy's got like post concussion.
Yeah.
So
Well, you never know, I guess, but I just always took it at first. It's not my business to really dig into why it happened.
Exactly.
So my assumption was, well, it just might be something personal, and hey, good for him. But he did have all the tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he
Natural.
looked like $1 million bucks.
Yeah.
He was a good looking kid. So.
He was super young and I think married, so that,
Yeah,
he
again,
just
I
missed
wasn't
his
going to
wife.
get into that, but
Well,
yeah,
it's
married.
not that. I mean, he's just young and,
Yeah.
married. That's
Yeah.
not too personal. It's just,
Yeah.
if it was a different time, maybe I think he would have continued, because, like you said, he was awesome. Like, and I feel like the guys who had the training from Top Rope and the training from Slam Tech always made like the perfect wrestler. When they
Yes.
had both sides of the training, they always, like, that was like the perfect finish. Whether
Right.
it was a newer Top Rope training with you guys, or whether it was back with Rickhouse back in the day, it was,
Right.
for whatever reason, those guys that had both trainings were so polished.
Right.
And
And plus, it helped a lot, the volume of shows that were available to work, and to be able to work at the PAL, which is like bar none. We've said that in the Littleton Opera House are like the two,
Yeah.
the best venues in New England to wrestle, and to come up in front of those fans in Fall River. I mean, they just talk about a way to to sink or swim. I mean, if you go up there and you lay an egg in the ring, they don't forgive you for
Right.
some time. I think about guys who, like, 2 years later, it's like, wow, they had a bad couple first matches, and 2 years later they're still like chanting like, you suck. And
Right.
like Mike Foster at one point, I remember when this is going back to when he started wrestling, somebody akin to him saying he was similar to Owen Hart. And at the time they had done the whole thing with Owen Hart with, he's a nugget, and
Yeah.
like 2 years ago they're still chanting nugget at the kid, and it's like, that was 15 years ago, 16 years ago, and they're an unforgiving and like
Yes.
unforgetting fan base.
Yep. That's that we were talking about the off air. The Fall River is kind of like its own. It has its own thing.
Yep.
They are an unforgiving crowd, but they also, I mean, if you can't have a good match there, or at least get a reaction, you're doing something wrong,
Oh,
because they
absolutely.
want to react.
And I think, very truthfully, there's a reason why in before WWE kept themselves only going to stadiums and arenas, there's a reason why they used the Bank Street Armory the way they did, and then later on ECW, because it's a hotbed crowd. It was very accessible, and they would come out in droves and react like bloodthirsty. They loved
Right.
it. So
Yep.
really cool area. And so you guys were at I was thinking about this on the way in when we were talking about, like, when you see some of the movies, when they lay out how a movie is, they'll start with, it's like in the present, you're at like whatever show it is, and then it's the big flashback, and it almost feels like that's kind of the way I'm leading this, because you guys were at Top Rope last night at the Fall River at the
Yes.
PAL. Top Rope Promotions, which, as I've said, Ryan is the head trainer at the Lockup, and he's very involved in the company. A lot of his students are coming through there, so he's very invested there. Had a big event last night.
Yep.
headlined by names that we've talked about here before, Tommy Dreamer and Spike Dudley in a tag match against each other with the top rope champion Chuck O'Neal, who is kind of like, if you've been paying attention to NXT, he's kind of the Matt Riddle before Matt Riddle. He was like the first of the guys who were doing Ultimate Fighting, UFC guys who decided they were going to get trained and do pro wrestling.
Right.
Because I think he was probably 3 or 4 years ahead of Matt Riddle, deciding that he was going to do that.
Yep.
And he was training with initially with Biff,
Yep.
and then with you guys. And then Matt Riddle did the Monster Factory way. But again, he was the first name of those recognizable UFC type names who decided he was going to take the pro wrestling route.
Right. He came in and started with Eric Spicely.
Oh yeah,
They
right.
started
Yeah,
together.
Yep,
yeah.
I remember that name as well. And you guys had them feuding for a while. And
Beyond did.
oh, okay,
yeah.
that's what it was. All right,
But
I knew they were
Beyond
wrestling each other. And then, and then
And
powerful
those
Pat
were
Garrett.
awful.
Yeah, powerful Pat Garrett tagging with Tommy Dreamer
Yep.
last night. So pretty big main event over there. So
Sure.
and you guys were talking a little about that. So new champions, new tag champions, new
Yes.
interstate champions,
New tag team champions. The Jason Daniels and Tyler Nitro. The first time teaming.
Yeah.
And they're the tag team champions. That former tag team must have been really bad if they're losing to these guys. Jason just lost two matches in a row to Nick Steele in under 4 minutes, but he's a champion now, so it's cool.
Well, Tyler Nitro cashed in his briefcase there for the tag team
Yes.
title opportunity after
Winning
losing
it.
the
Yeah.
match.
Hey, super nice of him to do that. I mean, if I had a briefcase and could have any title match, it'd probably be a heavyweight title match.
Right.
Maybe interstate. Probably not tag team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in Jason Daniels' defense, there's not many guys who would probably last more than 4 minutes with Nick Steele these days.
That's true. That's true.
Can you imagine if Nick was in the point he is now, but he was angry Nick from?
From 2002, 2001. Yeah.
I don't want to think about those days anymore.
Yeah.
I think people have nightmares about that thought.
Nightmare Nick Steele.
Wake up in the middle of the night, scream, "What happened? Nick Steele's coming to get me!"
Clutching your chest.
Well, worse than Nick. I was talking to. I don't even know who I was talking to last night, but I said, it's funny because I remember I was, me and Rich go back since like I started. He was one of the first guys I ever met. So, one of the first guys I ever liked. Because everybody else was a jerk and hated me. But maybe I was the jerk and they hated me. So I was saying, me and Nick kind of got along because he saw that I had some amateur wrestling experience and he could mold me. And so we were even friendly, and we ended up doing a match, and Nick chopped me to bits, right? Hey, whatever, he's trying to introduce me. He throws me to the outside, and Athena, his wife at the time, chopped me, and I was like, give me back to Nick! Give me back to Nick! Yeah, I mean, hers were vicious.
That was for real with her.
Yeah, I was like, oh my.
Yeah.
And then during practice, I don't know if you, training, I don't like calling it practice. Training.
I'm the same way, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember this, but Athena used to train with us, and so I was new, and I didn't really understand how things went. And it was Nick and Athena and Duke, Nick's stepson. And she would do, we would do drills, and she would do horrible. And Nick would be like, all right, good job. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, what's going on? No,
what do you mean?
It was awful. What are you doing? And then later on, he told me, but if I said anything, she would talk back and complain and just hold up the class. And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And which is kind of what I do now when, there's guys in the school that shouldn't be there.
When Smith takes the drill.
When Smith's there.
Poor Smitty.
And I feel bad for him but it's been 5 years,
Right.
and you can't even grab a proper headlock, or what I deem to be a proper headlock. So it's just like, all right, man, cool. And then he's going around to shows and he was at Caleb's show, and I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? He's like, I'm trying to get in the Rumble. I'm like, what? What? He's like, yeah, I told them you trained me. I said, you need to shut your mouth. I told all you bad wrestlers, Nick trained you.
I'll tell you, I'll say about Smitty, though, I've never met somebody who makes me feel like he's so happy to see me every time. Like, the big, hey, man, how are you? Like,
yeah, he's definitely the new age Steven Weiner.
You know what? That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny.
He got cocked last night at the bar.
Smith did?
Yeah. Oh my
Oh,
god.
no.
And like just drinking too much too fast.
Oh,
and
yep.
so I didn't catch on to that until afterwards. So he's talking to us, and the bartender made Channing Thomas vodka soda, and it was really strong. Like Channing took a sip and made this face and was like, "Oh, that is way too much." Whatever, right? And Smith comes around, and we're like, "Smith, man, what are you doing?" Something. I was, "Oh, you can have this water," and he just chugged it. He's like, "Yeah, that's water," and I was like,
He's not human.
Give me your keys." You know? So
He can drive?
he drives. Well,
What?
he can legally he can drive. I'm not saying he's a good driver.
I'm not saying I'd let him have the keys to my car.
Right. I might give him the keys to Steve's van, but yeah.
God.
So yeah, we have new tag team champions.
Yes. Yep.
Going back, and the disappointing thing about that match, and we were talking to each other on the way here. The disappointing thing about that match, and I know it may be breaking kayfabe, brother, but
We do a lot of that here.
Oh, good. All right. So it was so disappointing because the match was not awful, but the beginning was really just color by numbers. Same thing I've seen a million times wrestling. And literally the night before, this is what aggravated me, was I hand-fed them the match. I said, "Look, this is the story we're telling. Try to come here, 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 and here, and then you can fill in the rest." And all the good things that they learned the night before, they forgot, and all the stuff you can color by numbers, they kept in. I was really disappointed in them, and disappointed in Jason more than anybody.
Yeah.
because
I feel like that was an opportunity for him to be the veteran of the match, which
Yes.
doesn't often happen for
Yep.
him, to take the lead and take the reins and to really put something out there. And, it was just a basic tag match.
Yeah, which was good for them.
Yeah, sure.
Because they, Caesar and Travis, because they haven't been able to have a good basic match because they're new. Travis is still 1 year in.
Yeah.
I forget that sometimes because he's advanced so far, but he literally he started in December 2017, so he just had his anniversary 1 year training. Like he started training. So I give him a lot of flack, but I expect more from Jason. He's been around like 4 years, and he started with TK.
Yeah.
So
And it's tough because the heels you were just saying that was Jay Gillette's kid, Travis,
Yes.
and his partner. They're heels.
Yes.
And so being young and in the business, and if you're the heel, you kind of take the leadership role in a match, and to be young and green and that, it's tough. It's a lot of responsibility and stuff. But when you have somebody trying to lay things out and lay you a framework, and if it just falls apart, forget it. It's it just goes.
So I think they came back and they were really happy that it went as well as it did. And then I just kind of ripped them a new one. I said, "What are you doing? You this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I gave you that match. I helped you. All the pivot points, and they kind of got the story across. But they didn't take their time. You know what was really good, Rich? Because you had mentioned this during it. He said, or maybe it was you or Joey. One of you mentioned, like, shouldn't there be a moment where Tyler Nitro looks at the briefcase? And I'm like, absolutely. And that's the only thing that got across. And then the ring announcer ruined it. We talked about this because then it was supposed to be he cashes in the briefcase after they lose. They get rolled up, whatever, cheat, 1, 2, 3, and then Tyler Nitro, when they're celebrating, cashes in the briefcase and then quick roll up 1, 2, 3, right? Well, he does it. He did a really good job with the briefcase and the ref, like looking at it and gives it to the ref. Ref calls for it, and then Davis, the ring announcer, he announces it in a very slow manner. I've just been informed. Well, now these guys that got their back turned to you know something's going on.
Yeah.
So it didn't. I mean, again, little things because it didn't necessarily ruin everything, but it could have been done a lot better.
Right, and like when you're saying if you were the holder of the briefcase, you would have used it for. But if you guys, in that role, if you play it upright, you're caught up in the moment. You can even use that. I wasted that, even though we won I wasted that. I was caught up in the moment, and I used what I should have used against whatever champion. But but if it gets drawn out too long, then it takes away some of that reaction time. And
I think Teddy is very quick to change. That's just Teddy, and I probably tend to linger too much. Like the middle ground would be best. I tend to want to do things start in January and end in August, where Teddy wants to start in January, end in mid-January. You know, so but the middle ground would be like April, May, June.
And I've always been big on like, hey, let's see if we can get a year out of this angle.
Yeah, well, me too. I think that's build it, start in January, and then when they finally it means something.
Right. That's I think one of the things that Rich and I always, when we were doing stuff with like NECW to PWF, we'd get like, it'd be like 2.5 years later. And do you realize that we started this angle technically 2 years ago, and we still like getting people now
mileage out of it?
Yeah, like
but as long as people are still interested in it.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's great.
Yep. And we were talking about Nico and Channing Thomas and how they have a really good chemistry. The crowd seems to be invested in both competitors, and we don't have to end it in next week or 2 weeks from now. It doesn't have to be ended. You could take a little hiatus, keep it going. It could go another 6 months, and their matches won't be boring because they have a really good chemistry. Two young, in-shape guys that seem to. Nico's really starting to get the storytelling part of it, and Channing's following along really well, but he's still got a lot of bumps in the road. But like you could get 6 months out of it and not be boring. Instead, I feel like we have to.
Especially now that you guys did a title change. So now there's a different perspective.
Yeah.
So now you can get more out of it because it's not just Nico as the champion with Channing trying to get him. It's now the heel as the champion. Yeah. And to me, man, wrestling is the babyface chasing the title.
Yep.
That's wrestling to me, period. Like, no matter what it is. So I'm looking forward to it. They can easily stretch this out. So we'll see.
And the thing is, with the fan base that you guys are fortunate to have there, as much as we sometimes as wrestlers would joke about maybe the level of cognitive ability of the stupid Fall River fans, but they have memories great memories, and they follow it passionately. So you can totally do that. All right, well, we're gonna cool you guys down for 3 or 4 months, and then that moment where whatever that match is, and then boom, they bump into each other, turn around. As soon as they make eye contact, the people are like, "Oh, I know this." Boom, and you've got that reaction right away.
I think a big thing that comes into play, and I'm sure you guys have been promoters, so you understand some people. Where I differ from Steve and Ted, who are the other two that help. Steve's the owner, but Ted with running Top Rope Promotions, is that they don't seem to understand that there can be a cooling off period, and that not every show can be a big feel show, because if every show is a big feel show, then no show is a big feel show. You have to have down, just like in a show itself, when you do the match order, you have to have a downer to bring the crowd down. Doesn't have to kill the crowd, but you bring the crowd down so the next match can come up. Same with the events. If you can have kind of a regular down event that's just 7 matches, no gimmicks, no big anything, just advancing storylines, and do 150 people, that's fine, knowing that the payoff is going to draw double that.
Yeah.
But if every show you're going out there to try to draw this big house, you no longer have that follow-up. You just have the same. And then when you do have a really big show, they'll have another big show in next month or the month after.
That's why Bill Watson run the Superdome every month.
Yeah.
That's why they built the Superdome. We're gonna draw in our however many 1,000 each show we do in each area, but when we blow things off, we're gonna draw 70,000 or whatever. So.
And you can do that. You can do that with the local guys.
Yeah.
You absolutely can. I remember that Rich was there at Yankee Pro, and one of the first things. Matches I remember drawing just based on the feud was Nick Steele and Brickhouse Baker in 3 Stages of Hell, or something like that, whatever it was called.
Some gimmick match.
Yeah, but I remember the PAL at that point, because we were running it 2 times a month and we were running 4 times, New Bedford, Fall River, that the PAL was like, and they were $2 tickets, maybe draw 90, 100 people every 2 weeks. It was really low. But when that blow off came, now you got double that.
Yeah.
So it draws. And now that we only run it once every 8 weeks, which I think is silly, but whatever.
Do you think it should be less?
It should more.
It should be monthly.
Monthly.
I agree 100%. And possibly the same Like if it's the second Friday of the month.
Yep.
So you establish that.
Yes. So yes, it's advertising. It's forward-thinking advertising. I know every second Friday there's going to be wrestling there without fail.
Of course, the Honky Tonk Man would say you make it the first Friday of the month.
Of
so you
course.
so you get those monthly benefits coming in.
Yes. And some people still think that way. Yeah. But I think nowadays people, if they know, even if it's a second Friday, they'll know it's coming up.
Yeah.
They'll save it. Yep, absolutely. But I mean, you could do that. And I tried to explain in my large Facebook post that I posted in the Top Rope group after Teddy kind of vented at that December show about everything that he booked and that got mad about it. And that's not, I should preface this, nothing against Teddy. I love Teddy.
And you guys have been working together as a
forever.
team for forever.
For almost my entire run. So we just have differing opinions. But I think a lot of what plays into that too is kind of professional jealousy. Like he looks better, he gets more bookings, he's more charismatic, people like him more, very personable. Whereas I might be considered the better wrestler, a better trainer, more crisp, that type of thing. And maybe I understand it more. So it's a contradiction, the two of us. So I think there's always that professional jealousy.
If we could just get you guys to be just one person, you'd be the perfect wrestler.
So I want to preface saying that, but I think I was talking about like in that post, I said you got to look at the matches as free advertising. Like the crowd you've got there. There's no more your market than that crowd.
Yeah.
They are willing to fork over money for independent wrestling. That's your crowd.
And you know that.
And you know that. So if you don't use your stories or angles or personalities to get them back there and you just rely on posters, every time you go out, you are just crap shooting. You don't know what you're going to get. But you use that time to invest, and people will come back.
Yep.
It's like soap operas. It's every TV show. It's every movie. It's everything you've ever seen. I was thinking of it coming up here, Seinfeld, right? Hugely popular shows. Within that 22-minute episode, you had a couple different stories that would end at the end. But you also had a huge overarching story that went from episode to episode to episode that you could follow. So even though you had it's just like a show. You have stories or angles that can begin and end, but you also have an overarching theme that makes people want to come back and see it. And I don't think we've done a really good job doing that, only because there's three people in charge. Or Steve's in charge, but three people stirring the pot, cooking, and we all have differing views. And sometimes we go, we need to do this right now because it's going to sell 20 tickets, which is ultimately, you want to make as much money as you can.
Yeah.
So it's that coffee. I'm going on a tangent.
That makes sense, though. That's like a really good way of breaking it down of the symmetrics of what a show should and what an event should be.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I was actually really psyched when Rich said, Drew wants to come in and do the show was because, and I think this is where some of that, we were saying one of the most polarizing people, like people either like him or don't like him. But I think the reason, and like you said, when your students came up after the match, when you're talking to the guys after the tag match, they were happy the match, and you were like, you cut them down, you were real about it, and and I think one, that's why your students have done well, because you're honest with them.
Yeah.
You're not pulling, hey, great guy, rah, rah, rah. You're going to give them the support they need, but you're going to call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why people either like you or don't like you, because some people just like, straight shoot at me. Tell me what you, but I think that's one of the reasons why I was psyched to have you in, because that's who you are, and that's the reputation that you've developed. But I think that's why some people like you or don't like you. If you go and have a stinker, not only are you going to tell them it's a stinker, you're going to tell them why it's a stinker,
right.
And 20 minutes later, you'll break it down for them as to why it was, which is why you're an effective trainer.
And honestly, that's me in real life. Like, that's me in my real job. And we have commonality. We've worked in the same field.
Right.
And, when we have our managers meeting, they'll ask for feedback, and nobody wants to speak up about the things they want to speak up about. And I'll raise my hand, and I try to do it respectfully, but I say, look, this is what I think is going on, and I think this is the process to overcome that. And I can see sometimes they look at me like, you need to be quiet. Like, I don't, but I mean, that's who I am. But it goes back, so with that tag match, it's funny because Caesar, he kind of has an attitude, and I don't know where that came from, but whatever, he's got a little bit of an attitude. And the other three really seemed concerned about my feedback. They were really listening. I was kind of disappointed that whatever. And Caesar just didn't really care. And I said, Caesar, it seems like you just don't really care. And he's like, yeah, I mean, it's whatever. And I said, what's up with that? He said, well, because I thought overall it was pretty good, and you're really looking into things. And I said, yes, that is my job.
Yeah.
Job job, right? Because if you don't fix this now, then you're going to rely on that old standby that I hate, which is, well, the crowd liked it.
Yeah.
That doesn't make it right. That match could have been Caesar and Flex against Teddy and Sandy Starr, and the crowd would have ate it up.
Right.
Because Teddy's a great babyface and they're effective heels. That doesn't make it right.
Well, would you like that particular crowd to like it, or would you like any crowd to love it?
Right.
That's the difference.
And come back and see more.
The thing with guys like Caesar is, what I would say to a guy like him is, take that match out of the PAL.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And put it in West Warwick, put it in Lowell, put it in West Newbury, wherever all these other companies run. Are you going to get that same reaction?
Right.
And at that match last night, I don't think so.
No.
And that's honestly the reason why New England has become one of the main areas that the WWE has been sort of looking for guys, and why I think that we've gone through seeing a lot of our folks move on into developmental is because it's not because we have guys who can do great flippy doos up here. Right. That's not what there are guys who are athletic, whatever, but the people who excel up here is because their psychology is good. And it doesn't matter what style of wrestling you do, if your psychology is spot on, you can work with anybody. And that's what we're seeing with, Matt Taven. No one's going to think of Matt Taven as a luchador yet.
Right.
He's had a run down in Mexico, with luchadors.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's because he knows how to put a match together. He knows how to get a reaction.
And I mean, those three guys, I use those guys obviously as examples a lot of time. But it actually goes back to Mike Bennett, too, because Mikey, when I was bringing those guys up, Taven, the first person I put Taven with was with Mike Bennett. I remember, he was at the Fairhaven VFW, and I said, why don't you come over with me to Spikes and whatever. And the first match at the PAL, he tried to sit next to me at the PAL, Matt Taven did, because I'm his boy now, and I'm the only person that knows. And I said, no, you go sit over there with Mikey and BK and all those guys. Those are the guys you want to be around because you're going to learn. And he did, and he did. But because Mikey can have a match with anybody, he could go out there and he could do everything. He might not be great at one thing. He's really good at a lot. Yeah. He's an awesome hand and super effective as I always liked him as a heel, but he could play both, And now you saw that with Taven, and now you see that with Vinny, and you see that with TK. I remember TK was telling me TK is a very polarizing figure in the Ring of Honor locker room because he runs his mouth. He got a lot too quick. But he was wrestling, I don't remember if it was Cody Rhodes or Jay Lee. It was wrestling somebody. And spot got blown, or they forgot something, and TK could just keep going. Yeah. Because he called it on the fly, and he knew where he was, and he got that little level of respect, like, okay, this guy might be a jerk, because he talks too much, but at least he kind of knows what he's doing. Right. But so, not to take over the thing, but I was thinking, so a couple weeks ago we did a show at the Brockton VFW where Spike came, and I see Spike every few years. He's not really involved, and we kind of keep a little bit of touch here and there. And I was talking to him, and I said, I was really psyched, and I said, hey, the last few years I've really gotten into Billy Robinson because I like wrestling, and I said, what do you think about Billy Robinson? He's like, nah, he's a great wrestler, but he's not a personality. And I said, no, I understand that, but I really like the wrestling. And then we kind of got into training, and he's like, you know what? I'll never be happy. It's hard to train because I'm just never happy. I always find something. And I go, that's where I got it from. I can remember having a match, me and Matt Magnum against the Alden brothers and Adams, and it was a ladder match. And I came up with this brilliant spot for the finish, and I said, why don't we grab a table and put it on top of two ladders like it's a scaffold, and we'll go back and forth, and the finish will be, I take the big bump at the end. Okay, let's do that. So we have the match, and I take my regular stupid crazy bumps, which I tell people, don't ever take stupid bumps. But, I'm like all over the place, right? Do as I say, not as I do. And so we do it, and I come to the back, and I'm elated because we went out there, and I took a bunch of crazy bumps, and I did the scaffold spot. And I go out there, and I go, Spike, what'd you think? And he's like, honestly? And I'm like, of course, man. And he's like, anticlimactic. And I did a Brickhouse Baker. You know, so I go, so I was pissed. You know, because I'm like, I was very like social justice warrior. How dare he say something like that? I put my body on the line for him. Very unjust. Yo, I can't believe you said it. And he's like, oh, what do I've had a lot of fights with him. What do I know? I just been in the WWE for 10 years or whatever he said. I'm like, rah, rah, rah. And then like a week later, I'm like, yeah, no, he was right. Totally anticlimactic. It was nothing. You know, it was nothing. But he was never super complimentary. He could always find something super nitpicky.
Yeah.
And that's how I am, but it's super helpful. And now when I train, I've had quite a few trainers. So Brickhouse, I find myself being Brickhouse sometimes in that I do it because I love wrestling and I've got a big heart. So I'm like, that's where I get Brickhouse from.
And he loves meatball subs.
And he loves meatball sub. Duck clothesline meatball sub, which was a joke that originated at training, and then Rich got going, you know, and now everybody says it, but they don't know the origin, you know?
Yeah.
So I always think when I have a big heart and I do it for no reason, I do it for all the right reasons. I'm like, that is totally Brickhouse.
Amen, yep, totally.
And then when I do the shoot wrestling or catch wrestling or something like that, I'm like, yeah, I'm Nick. And then when I really break it down and you can never please me, I'm Spike. And then sometimes I catch myself doing the Bob Evans face, you know, after they do something. You can't see me, but Bob would be like... you know, you do the Bob Evans face, and I'm like, it's funny the traits you pick up from people, and you see them grow and stuff like that. So it is kind of funny, but yeah, Spike, man, we had a conversation last night, and it's so disheartening what we did to him or didn't take advantage of. I mean, he was in a bad place at the time too, but we didn't help that. Like his trainees were like buck nasty, you know, and like we didn't go out and find him good guys. I had to bring him Taven and Magnum and Vinny, who at that point it was basically more or less me with him on the side, and I always felt because he was not the guy that you saw on TV was what he did to make money, but the psychology that he had was really brilliant, old school, made sense. Personality, it was great, and he did it last night in his match. He did nothing in his match, and him and Tommy told a really good story. Yeah. You know, it was very story driven, but they touched all the pivotal points, and he did nothing. He got rolled up, and I said, that's all it has to be sometimes. Right, yeah. You know, so
I just want to preface before we actually go into kind of the beginnings of your career and what got you was when Ryan was talking about in quotes his crazy bump. I'll take crazy bumps. There are a lot of guys who take crazy bumps, but I just want to put this out there. One of the matches I saw him in was a multi-man cage match. Now you want to talk about crazy bump? He charged at somebody and it wasn't like a 9 or 10 foot cage. It was probably like a 7 or 8 foot cage. It was lower, but he charged at whoever it was, and I think it might have been like Kahuna.
Yeah,
and takes a backdrop. Takes said backdrop up over the cage and to the floor.
Yeah.
So when he's talking about crazy bump, then he won't ring his own bell. He'll just mention, "Oh, take a crazy bump." I want to like be specific about the level of crazy, and that was one of many bumps, like from the top of the cage to the floor, not like land on my feet and crumble. Like this was up and over, land on my back on the padding on the floor, very little padding on a hardwood floor. So when he's talking about crazy bumps, there's been some exceptional ones, and I haven't seen them all, but I've heard about some. Even like the last match you had a few of those.
Yeah,
trademark.
Oh man, that was scary.
That was ridiculous.
So scary because I love that bump. By the way, it always hurts, but I've always loved that over the cage bump because I've never seen it, and it just always worked well, and I just hope that it worked right. But I want to preface, I know it's not needed. I just when I was a kid, I liked jumping around. If parkour was good, like a thing back then, I would have done that. Like I just loved flying around and flipping and jumping and falling. That was just me as a kid throughout, being a teenager. So I liked that part of wrestling. But I know not to do it. But the match, because you ref that match,
the one in Brockton at the field,
right?
Oh yeah,
that was you.
Oh yeah.
So I was running around doing, God knows what, trying to get the show ready, and I just lost my butt the night before. I lost a ton of money in Lowell, which never run a show out of spite. Just don't do that. It doesn't work. So Nico, what do you want to do? I said, I don't know. We'll just, we'll mess around, and then at the end, I don't know. I'll do a big bump through the table. And that was more or less the plan. So then I'm setting it up, and I'm standing up there, and the ladder's in the ring, and the table's on the outside, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, oh, no. Oh, I don't know how I'm going to take this. But I couldn't walk back. I couldn't climb back down,
Yeah,
so
you're already there.
I was just like, okay, go. And I just jumped, and I prayed for the best, and that table gave no give, and it was just a flat surface, and I was like, oh, in my head, I'm like, oh, but then I think you said something to me, like, are you okay, or something like that. Somebody said something, and I was like, okay, I'm alive.
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm so glad it's over. But it was like it was the worst. That was bad. I went to the hospital after that.
Did you really?
I was peeing blood.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
Right,
I mean, it
right.
was.
And talk about a thud.
I've seen a lot of his stupid bumps. I'll call him stupid.
Yeah,
I don't want to. I don't
stupid.
want to use the word crazy. I'm going to call him stupid.
Yeah.
And
True.
this one was
The stupidest.
stupid. Like,
I should have finished with an arm bar on the top of the ladder.
but yeah.
It
So-
works, kid.
You ever been in a room where the phone's not supposed to work and it starts ringing?
Yeah, what the hell was
I
that?
don't know. But it's probably what it is. It's probably a reminder. We actually have. I just want to throw this out real quick. We have some listeners who had touched base with me midweek, and I was supposed to throw out a happy anniversary thing from one of our listeners to another. So from Clay to Ian, happy anniversary in wherever you are right now. So
All right. What is it?
Happy
Clay?
anniversary.
Clay, yeah, from Clay to Ian, yeah.
All right then.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
So, big old bump backdrop over the cage for both of y'all.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
which actually good timing here because we haven't even gotten into like the history stuff here. But I'm going to do a just because it's a logical break and things to let you know you are listening to 101.1 FM WBRULP Providence, streaming online at bsrlive.com. Bronze Student Community Radio, serving the curious listener. The show is the Pier 6 Roundtable. In studio with us today is Ryan Drew, who is the head trainer of the Top Rope Promotions Lockup Wrestling School. He's a longtime wrestler, and we actually, we haven't even gotten into the history. We've been just, riffing on the business itself, but I really do want to talk about what kind of brought him to here, not the studio itself, but what brought him to kind of this point in his career. So let's put it on rewind and go back to before you got anywhere near the wrestling business. What was it as a kid? We all have that moment. Well, most of us, unless you're one of those bodybuilders who somebody said he's a body guy, let's train him to wrestle.
That's me.
And then you get brackets.
Ew.
I'm a body guy. You know what's funny? So one time, we were having I was running Fairhaven, and Sean Candido and all those guys were really upset because they were in the Fairhaven VFW, but I was running across the street, totally out of spite. But I was like, no, it's because Nick lives in Fairhaven. No, it's not
Was it the
spite.
Seaport Inn?
Yes,
Right?
Seaport
Okay,
Inn.
Yep.
And so then, all those guys that wrestled there were like, Drew, he's and one of the guys was like, oh, I'm sorry that we're not body guys like you. And I was like, this guy don't know me.
What
but
a
thank you.
compliment. It's probably Dave Oliveira that said that. Though.
Well, maybe. He's a body guy.
He sure is.
The first time you were called a body guy. But
Yeah, first and last. But that's okay. I printed that out. I framed it.
Yeah.
right on.
It's on my mantle.
So what brought you back to those days? Like when you started, what was it that first about wrestling that got you? Was it a certain wrestler or was it flipping channels? Or
it was Hulk Hogan.
Oh, right on,
It was
okay.
Hulk Hogan, WrestleMania 7. And wrestling had always been around anyways.
Yeah.
You can't be a child of the 80s without knowing what wrestling is. And
Yep.
I kind of knew Hulk Hogan through the A-Team because I was a big Mr. T fan.
Oh, right on,
Yeah,
okay.
I used to really want to be Mr. T. And one time my brother and cousin were like, you can be Mr. T if you put your head in this plate of spaghetti. And I was like, really? Let me do that. And it was hot spaghetti, and I burned myself. I had burns. But,
The love of brothers.
Yes. And so I knew who he was, and then my brother was going. We had these two brothers that lived across the street from us that we hung out with, and my brother was going to their house to see WrestleMania or something I don't know what it was, and I really wanted to go. And so I really just kind of wanted to hang out with my brother and that guy's brother. They were older. So I was like, yeah, I really want to go. I love wrestling. And then my mother said no. And so then I can be manipulative. And so then I asked my grandmother to order on cable. And she didn't want to say no, but she didn't want to pay for it. So she talked to my mother into letting me go to my friend's house because then she didn't have to pay for it, right? And so, I remembered the show. And the ones that stood out was... I liked a lot of the show. And I remember Macho Man and Miss Elizabeth. Like, I remember that story. That was such a great story. And I was just a kid, but I got it, and her coming and crying and the hug and the shoulder thing. But what really stood out to me was the Hulk Hogan Sergeant Slaughter match, because it was in the middle of the Gulf War and we were talking about it at school. And just the visual, the moment. I talk a lot about moments at training. The moment of at the end, and he's waving the flag, and it's the real Americans pumping, and he's got the belt, and everybody's cheering. And it was just such a great visual and this feel-good moment. And after that, that's what got me. That moment. I remember the match now, but there was nothing about that match that was, oh my God, phenomenal. It was the ending that got me. And after that, I was just like, I love Hulk Hogan. And then I was just consumed. I watched it every week and all the magazines. And I came from a poor family. So, like, if my mother wouldn't buy me a $2 Inside Wrestling magazine, then I'd be like, well, that's fine. And then I'm just going to kill myself. And then
Here's your magazine.
She'd be like, here's your magazine. And I don't have any money. I said, you better go steal it. So that's what got me into wrestling.
Somewhere Bill Apter would love to hear that level of commitment to his days.
Oh, man, yeah. Inside Wrestling, Wrestle America, all of those. PWI was a little more expensive. I could only get that like on the first of the month.
Those glossy pictures are expensive.
Exactly. But that's where I started learning about like Jerry Lawler and Austin Idol and Jeff Jarrett and that there was more to wrestling than just WWF. But of course I was a WWF, and it was Hulk Hogan all the way.
I remember the first time I flipped through one of those wrestling magazines. I had a friend who was so we were probably 4th grade. I was WWF at that time, really didn't know much. It was 84, 85. And he was the first one who had like watched NWA and he brought Wrestling Magazine, and like we couldn't like look at these in class because they had like Abdullah the Butcher cutting up Carlos Colon, they're gushing blood. You couldn't look at those things. That you might as well have had a Playboy. But we were at out at recess and we're looking at like, who are these guys? So that was my first like exposure to that. And then I found out that, oh wait, when I go to grandma's house, because I didn't have cable at the time, but my grandparents did. My neighborhood didn't even have it, but we could go there, and if we were there on a Saturday, they would totally let me go in my grandparents' bedroom and watch the TV in there, so no one had to watch it, and I could watch the Saturday 6:05 show.
Yes.
It was like the best thing ever when I could finally watch that.
I had gotten so obsessed with wrestling; it was my everything. And so I quickly got into like WCW. And I remember the Great American Bash and Sting and all that stuff, right? So I was so obsessed with it. I just loved so much of it that it actually forged a good relationship with my grandmother because, and I come from a close knit family, anyways. It's not like we were these pulled apart or anything, but I would go over there because she had cable, so I would stay the weekend. I would go home Friday night. I'd watch all the Saturday morning shows, Worldwide or whatever it was, Power Hour, then the Action Zone, then Superstars, then Challenge. Take a couple hours break, come back for the Saturday night show, and then sleep over. And then Sunday morning you get the Sunday morning cable show, and then Wrestling Challenge on Channel 64. So. And it was a repeat from Saturday, but I still watched it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, of course.
And then Sunday night, there was a main event, and then I'd go home. So I remember this one Saturday. Now, she knew I was going over to watch wrestling. Like, go to watch wrestling and eat, because she was a fat lady. She was called the Candy Lady. Like, she made candy and cake. She was awesome. So I'd go there and eat. And so she knew that's why I was there. So 6:05's coming up, and I'm going to watch it. And she comes into the living room. There's only one cable box in the house, and turns on like one of her shows. It was maybe it was Murder, She Wrote or something like that.
Gotta watch my story.
Yeah. She had to watch something. And I was so angry, and I was like, okay, you're going to pay for this. So I was like, oh, I'm just going to go get a water. And I went into the kitchen, and she's cooking, and I was like, all right. And I spit into her potatoes.
Yeah, that'll learn her.
Yeah, and I was like, that's what you get.
Gotcha.
Yep. And I always
Candy lady.
go back. Yeah. I always Candy Lady. No candy here. It's just spit potatoes.
His first angle.
So, yeah, right?
Ryan Druber.
And it carried through for 6 months in the big blow up. No.
Yeah. You got to watch.
Yeah, right? Well, actually, I had this briefcase that I cashed in on her.
Perfect.
You should have cashed in for the steak, but you waited for the potatoes.
Right. Double potatoes.
Double potatoes.
So,
no spit.
No spit. But yeah, I mean, I was really so obsessed with it. But I always I felt bad for a long time. And then I was like, well, the potatoes were boiling, so
It cleaned them up. It killed the germs.
And stuff like that. But I spit in her potatoes. Like, don't mess with me and my wrestling.
That's right.
I knew this was going to be a good show.
Yeah. Don't mess with me and my wrestling.
So where does it cross over? So you from where do you go from spitting in potatoes deciding, hey, I'm going to get into wrestling? And
that's my signature now. I just spit in everybody's potatoes.
Oh, right on. Okay.
So you know what's funny is all three of our grandmothers are responsible for us like being obsessed with wrestling. Like,
well, she didn't help. My having brothers is what made me obsessed with it, because you just naturally always wrestle around. You know, so my older brother Jared was into wrestling. Because again, child of the '80s, you become interested in wrestling. But then he started getting into monster trucks, right? So to aggravate me like a big brother would, when wrestling was on, he'd change it to monster trucks.
Monster Jam, Monster Jam, Monster Jam!
And he was like, a Bigfoot, And so I soon realized, though, that complaining didn't work to get him to change it, because he liked to aggravate me. So I was like, all right. Yeah, Jared, I like monster trucks. I want to watch that show. And he'd be like, really? I'm like, yeah. So then he started turning on wrestling. And I'd be like, can you put it back to the monster trucks? And he would keep the wrestling on. So I was playing him until he caught on. And when he turned it back to monster trucks, I was like, yeah, thank you. I like this. And he's like, I know what you're doing. And I was like, oh. But for like that hour, man, I had him. And I thought I was the smartest guy in the world.
See, psychology at a young age.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Psychology, manipulation, potato spitting.
That's wrestling. That's wrestling in a nutshell.
Spit at a fan in the crowd, spit in the potatoes.
Yeah.
So where is it that you? I'm sure being in the area, the Brockton area was the first like exposure to local wrestling. Was it through like at the time Yankee Pro? Or
no, it was Killer Kowalski's All Star Wrestling.
Oh, you did get to. All right, great.
Yeah. So I went one year. My uncle Jimmy surprised me with tickets. I think it might have been 91, 92. It was in that era, and he surprised me with tickets, and I went, and it was the most awesome thing in the world. Even now, when I think about independent wrestling, I want that feeling I got when I walked into that big gymnasium, and there's 1,000 people there, and it's wrestling. So I was like, oh my God, this is it. So for 3 or 4 years, I went to the Killer Kowalski's All-Star Wrestling. And then one summer, I stayed with my father down in Fairhaven, and I went to the Whaling City Festival, didn't know there was going to be wrestling there, and I see a wrestling ring. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went up to there'll be a show tomorrow. So my father was nice enough to bring me to the free show. And I remember watching that show and being like, what the heck is this? Mm-hmm. This is not the wrestling I saw before. And I remember Tex McCoy and Colossus. Those are the two I had remembered. And I remember talk about ego. Like I went back to my father's house, got my notebook, my emo notebook where I wrote song lyrics, and, oh, my life is awful. And I wrote Yankee Pro Wrestling a letter about how their show stinks, and they should hire me to come in and teach their guys how to wrestle.
Wow.
Talk
really?
About an ego.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
I know. I absolutely did.
How did I never hear that before?
At the age of 16, I was like, look, if you need me to come in and show your guys how to backflip, I will do that. But that was the most boring show I've ever seen.
So how old were you? I mean, I'm jumping ahead a little bit.
16.
When you started training, though?
At 19.
Okay, so there wasn't even that long in between. Right.
And what's funny is around the same time, I'm sure Teddy Goods is showing up as young Teddy with his signs about "I know you suck because I'm a smart mark."
Right. So. Yeah. But I wasn't a smart mark though. I didn't get into all of that.
Right.
I was watching WCW every Monday night and really into that. I just knew that was really slow and plodding and boring and not even close to what I was watching at Kowalski's. So I didn't understand it. I didn't get it. It made no sense to me. And I just thought, oh, here's a bunch of guys cab drivers and lunch ladies that wrestle. That's what it was to me.
So now you brought up Tex and Colossus. Who do you remember? Do you remember any like specific standouts from the Kowalski?
Oh yeah. Tony Roy was like the big one. And I loved seeing Tony Roy because I remembered him from TV. And I was like, I know that guy from TV. He's awesome. So Tony Roy, Terror Rising, Chris Duffy, the guy with the bone.
The guy with the bone.
Richard, Mad Dog Richard.
Mad Dog Richard, yeah.
Richard.
He was their ring guy.
Yep.
Yeah.
The ring announcer was Mel something. I say Mel Brooks, but
Mel Simons?
No. Yes, Simons. Yes. Old guy.
Mel Simons.
Don't. Just don't.
I'm just saying it was. And and of course Kowalski and stuff. But those are the guys I kind of remember. Wilcox, like a Wilcox. I don't remember the first name.
That was
Brian?
Bill Wilcox.
Bill Wilcox,
And
Flying Bill Wilcox.
Crazy flyer
Yeah.
for his day. I mean,
For his
nowadays
day.
it'd be, but back then no one
Yep.
did that stuff.
Perry Saturn.
Yep, Perry was there.
You know, the
John-
Bug Lady or Bug Manager, the Bug or something like that.
Okay.
Felix Weatherby, I think.
Felix, yep.
So there was a lot that they made an impression on me.
Yeah.
You know,
That's what I figured.
Brittany Brown.
Yeah. I figured those, like, there'd be people who showed up then that you stuck in your memory from back then.
Yeah,
'cause-
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris, what's funny is
Tim McNeely.
Yeah. Few years prior to that would have been, so probably 85, 86. I went to my first Killer Kowalski's All-Star Wrestling, and Chris Duffy was one of those guys who stood out as him. And, you know.
Yeah, really stood out.
Years later, I got to tell, hey man, it was my first independent show, and you were like one of two heels that like gave me as like a little kid in the crowd crap. Like I was like, what is this? They react to you, you know.
Oh,
So,
Trey, the smooth operator. He wasn't even
no.
Trey yet. He came out to smooth operator.
likes his
Wow,
peanut
he's
butter.
been around forever, man.
Smooth. Love smooth.
Wasn't even doing that yet. I remember going up to Terra Ryzen and who was Triple H, and asking for an autograph, and he was like, "No, kid." And I was like, "Oh, all right. Well, you'll never make it."
Yeah. Bum.
Where did he ever go?
Yeah.
Who the
Could
hell's
he
that
ever
guy?
be?
Okay, Terra Ryzen, enjoy your life.
Yeah. How many balconies have you jumped off?
Yeah.
So you've written a letter.
I'm going to spit in your potatoes.
Yeah. Yep.
So you've written a letter on how you're going to change Top Rope.
Yeah,
change
how I
Yankee
wanted
Pro
to help
Wrestling.
change it because it was really bad.
And you did. So
I did, yeah.
Mission accomplished years
we
later.
did.
No, so anyway, you said that. So how is it that you get from that point to now you're in your training?
I kind of forgot about wrestling, but forgot about the letter, and went back. Went back to Brockton after the summer, and went on with my life. But I always kept track of wrestling. I was a WCW. I was a Hogan guy, so I WCW, NWO, and it wasn't until I went to college up in Maine for communication. I went to the New England School of Communication, and I remember seeing an RPW, Rampage Pro Wrestling flyer they used to run at the Bangor Rec Center. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go to that. And I never did, but I went on their website a lot. And this is when they started doing message boards, and I'd just read the message boards, and they had tryouts for wrestlers, So I think I went down one time to go check it out, and they weren't there or whatever. But then that was when I learned you can train to be a wrestler.
Right.
And then I came back to Brockton after 6 months because my oldest brother Sean was sick. He was having a kidney transplant and all this stuff. So I quit college, bought a video store through happenstance. It's not like I had money. I was able to pay money over time. I want to throw that out there. I didn't come from money or anything. I couldn't afford a $2 Inside Wrestling magazine.
So you had a $3 video store.
right, 99-cent video.
Yeah, I was gonna say no. It was 99-cent video store.
So Mike Spada was now running Brockton, and I remember, and Whitman and the South Shore.
Well, he made Brockton.
He did. He'll tell you that.
UCSer.
I made that. And
Cause of me.
because of me, kid. So I went to one of his shows, and they had, we're starting a school. Go to wwanewengland.com, and we're starting a school, whatever. So I said, I think I had said, okay, I want to go to the school. And I didn't hear back from him, so I emailed Chaotic. And really what I wanted to get into was the writing, because when I went to New England School of Communications, I really wanted to explore writing and doing movies and film and stuff like that, right? So I was like, do you have like a class for writers? Like, I'd really like to learn how to write wrestling. And they said, no, whatever. And then I said, well, what about wrestling? And they said, well, it's $2,500 or however much it was. And I said, that's a little too much for me. And Mike Spada's was only $500, and he said, "Send me the money." And I said, "Okay, sounds legit, right?" Yeah, sure. So I sent him $500, and I never really heard from him. I got emails every now and then that says, "Yeah, it's coming up, it's coming up, it's coming up," but it never did. So that's when I went down to Yankee. I did a search, and I found Yankee Pro Wrestling. So my brother Jared brought me down one day, and I saw the two guys that stood out were Mike Majors and Mike Bennett. Those are, talk about polar opposite.
Yeah, right.
But I think it was just because at the time Mike Majors was young and in somewhat decent shape and fairly tall compared to like Fireball, Mike Sparks, and Ken Yamaguchi.
Ken
Yamaguchi! Yeah. All right. So
What?
So all those guys that were in the ring. So, but my brother did look at me and go, "Are you sure you want to do this? It looks like a bunch of kids messing around in the ring." And I was like, "Yeah, I do." So then I got involved with that. And my first training was at Yankee Pro with Backyard Rage.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
like
yeah.
Rage the wrestler, but Backyard Rage.
Yeah.
There's 2 Rages.
Like Mike Edwards' old partner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And he was he was very nice.
Yeah.
Really good dude.
Yeah.
Just
But
a
I mean,
pro.
he didn't know what he was doing.
yeah, exactly.
And Mike Majors puts me in the ring, and I'm with him, and he's like, "Hey, you want to take a pedigree?"
Oh,
I said,
yeah.
I really don't know how to. Oh, it's easy. Just land on your. But I never even learned to bump at that point, and just land on your stomach. All right. And he gave me the pedigree for real, of course, because he didn't know how to work. And my neck was never the same. That first bump, and I ever since that happened, my neck had never been the same. So, but at that time, then Spada found out I was going down to Yankee Pro, and he's like, "No, they'll break your neck. You know, they're gonna break your
And
neck."
you're thinking, oh, my neck.
Yeah.
He's
And I was
right.
like, "Oh, you're right."
Wow, this Sparta guy is pretty trustworthy.
Yeah.
So I started training at Spa. I did both. I would go down on Tuesdays and Thursdays to Yankee Pro Wrestling, and whoever was training that night, because it wasn't Baker necessarily. It was like a Portuguese Stallion and Tex McCoy, and it was just the run the gambit of
Yeah.
bad
And
wrestlers.
that's what it was.
Yeah.
It was just pick a night. Whoever
Yeah.
showed
At that
up.
time, it was we signed up thinking it was going to be like Brickhouse Baker and guys who should be training at
Scott
well,
Ashworth or whatever those guys. You would see
and it
the
would
shit.
be like Teddy and Brian
yeah,
Nunes and, like,
Rain.
Yeah, Dan for like I said, Brian Nunes taught me how to bump because nobody else was there
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
it.
Well,
Like,
that's what it was. I started with Top Rope. It was 95 when it was Yankee. And, I mean, we were there. Kyle and I started there. And at the time it was Mike Edwards and Brickhouse Baker. And every now and again, like Rick Fuller and Metal Maniac, those guys would come through. And then it was only like 7 or 8 months later that like Andy Jacks, Mark Chambers, those guys would start, Tim Towers, and we're the ones training them how to bump.
yeah.
8 months. I mean, we had a couple years of doing things incorrect with the NEWA, but then we had come over to there, and that's when we knew a lot of it. But we didn't have good mechanics. None of us had psychology, but that's where we started. So it was the same. It's always been that. Well, not now, but then that was the culture. It was like once you knew how to bump, you could train somebody.
Yes. So then I started. Sparta was running quite a bit at the time, and he said, "Come down to my shows. We'll train you an hour and a half, and before the show."
So it was like pre-show training.
Pre-show training.
Okay.
So that was cool, and I got to work with Tony Roy, which was cool because I remembered him from Kowalski days, and when Kowalski was there, he'd help out, even though I couldn't understand a word he was saying, but he would. Tony would interpret. Kowalski would come up and I'd be like, okay. And then Tony would be like, do this. And even then, I got to train. Eddie Guerrero was one of the guys. It was during his stint. And he was there, and he was watching, and he kind of gave a couple tips. And I was like, this is cool. Like, this guy was just on TV, So he gave a couple tips, and I was like, okay, he trained me. Eddie Guerrero trained me.
You don't believe me? Ask him.
Just ask him.
Yeah.
He'll remember me.
Credit Chris Hamrick on that one. Oof.
That's rough. But then that fizzled out, so I just ended up going to Top Rope, and Brickhouse Baker hated me, and that was kind of a long-running thread with our relationship. We'd get along for a few years, and then something would happen, and we'd hate each other, and then we'd get along, and then we'd hate each other, and then I'd hate David, which happened at PWF. Remember
oh
that?
yeah,
When
yeah,
I
yeah.
refused to shake his hand, then I ended up being a heat of the week. So sad. It was,
You may very well be the first ever Heat of the Week to ultimately be a guest, and an awesome guest so far too.
I feel
but
privileged.
I don't know that anybody else who is a Heat of the Week has ever been. I'm trying now. You're trying. Oh no. Well, there's somebody else. I just recognize somebody else. Skinning and grinning.
Just say it.
No, I'm not gonna. We'll talk about it later.
Skinning and grinning could be a lot of people.
I know.
No, but it was the king of skinning and grinning at the time. But we'll go back there later. So
It was then that. So then Baker hated me, and then everybody hated me. Everybody hated me for a long time. That was it.
So who? So you mentioned some of the less notable names in your training.
Well, I mentioned
class.
Mike Bennett.
You did no. You definitely mentioned, but he was Mike Benoit,
Mike
Yeah.
Benoit. He was Chris Benoit's illegitimate son.
who pronounced the name wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you actually started working shows, probably 3 months later.
No, not even. See, that was the thing. Guy hated me because everybody hated me.
Guy was booking.
Guy
you.
was the booker. Yeah.
Everybody hated me, so they would book the guy that I would only be booked in Brockton, 2 shows.
Like the
I sold
skating,
tickets,
the ice,
skating
the
rink,
ice
yep.
rink, right?
But so at the time though, so the only guys, because I refused to take Chop Shop one time, and not if it was Rick Fuller or even Baker chopping me, I'd respect that because they're men. But it was 15-year-old boys chopping me, and I was like, dude, I'm 19, I have a real job. Like, don't play tough guy with me.
Yeah.
Like, and I couldn't do anything back. If it was big guys doing it, I feel like it would have been different. I would have understood it more. But it was like, Stevie Sky and Fireball Mike Sparks and all those guys. And Stevie Sky gave me the Iggy after and was like, I know it's stupid, but you just have to take it. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have to take that, So, and that really pissed Baker off because the culture there was if you can't take chops, you're not strong.
Yeah.
Which is so kind of antiquated now, but I understand the thinking.
Yeah.
But it was just a little too much. And so I was outcast. And the only guys that would talk to me were the score guys, which Rich Bass was included, And Rich Bass was funny. So, like, he had a sense of humor. So, like, I could joke with him, and we had a joke for a long time, Tampoon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
I don't even know how that came about.
Yeah, I have no idea where that came from.
But, like him, so it was him, Mikey B, Brian, even Dan was nice enough, Pat, but Guy was not. Guy did
Which
not
was crazy
like me.
because, Guy was part of our friend.
Yeah.
Right.
Our friend group. So I think because Guy was the booker, that he would have to go and basically fall in line with what Brickhouse and those guys' lines of thinking were.
Yeah.
Where he didn't necessarily feel a certain way, but because he had to play politics,
Right.
Yeah.
that's the route that he chose to go. Because why wouldn't he like him? Because he fit in with the rest of us who were hanging out with Guy.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't that dynamic work?
Yep.
It just, I think it was just
I was the friendly guy on the outside. You don't want to be too close to me because you don't want any of the heat. And I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. So I would go early to training, and I would go in and I would do all my flips and get myself over with nobody there. I'd just play to the wall. Yeah, come on, make some noise. And then everybody show up and I'd leave because they didn't win. I just went another time.
And the funny thing is, that the old adage, be careful of the hands, the feet you step, the toes you step on the way up. Because now you think about it, and you run the school. You've been, for a good portion of the time, you were booking the shows, and obviously a lot of these guys were already out of the business by the time, or not in that area by the time you got to that point. But
actually, a lot of them were. I don't want to say I kicked them out. That's a harsh thing to say.
But you set a standard of what you wanted. It was you and Teddy and a few. You guys set kind of a standard on what you wanted your wrestlers to look like, what you wanted their commitment to training and being better wrestlers. I mean, you recognized Yankee Pro Wrestling was a fun place to start, but I mean, one of the places they ran was flea markets. Did you want to be a flea market wrestler, or did you want to be a professional wrestler? And that was really kind of the way the line was drawn. Yeah. I mean, from the outside looking in, but it was like guys have to be training regularly.
Yeah.
You need to be in shape, whatever that looks like. You need to be in wrestling shape. You need to look like a wrestler. Because how are you guys going to market guys who aren't looking like? But anyway, we'll roll back to. So a lot of those guys at the time you're on those shows. So did you start off? Were you from the very beginning H2O Ryan Waters?
No, I was.
Was there an American Idol gimmick?
There was an American
I thought
Idol
that
gimmick.
was you, but I wasn't positive.
The American Idol.
The American Idol. Yeah, because I was USA, Hulk Hogan, USA, right? So they need. They were like, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know, I guess I could do a red, white, and blue gimmick. And I said, I gave Guy a couple, because now he had to use me. Because you guys were leaving or something. I had to be used, It was a funky era.
The infamous score exodus?
Yes, it was right before it.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was before.
It was before it.
Yeah.
Because I did work with you guys, but it was only like a few months before it. It was really on the tail end of the score. And I gave him a couple name choices in American Idol. Ryan Waters was one of them, and he went with it. And then I remember Gino Giovanni came up to me and said, "That's a great name. You should come out and sing." And I just gave him the Bob Evans because I didn't have that confidence. and that was something Kevin Castro. Nope, Casanova, New York guy.
Kenny Casanova.
Oh yeah,
Kenny Casanova did on
because he was doing
shows.
the karaoke.
Yep.
Casanova.
So I didn't want to do that, and I loved it, but I can't do that. I don't have the confidence for that. So I was like, no, USA, and that's what it was. And then H2O came because we were just in one of the Nick Steele van ride, and he's like, you need a new name. I said, oh, whatever you want. He's like, what do you like? And I was like, well, I was a state champion springboard diver in high school, and I love swimming. I said, H2O. How about H2O Ryan Water? And I said, okay, H2O Ryan Waters.
So there's the diving thing. Is that where your comfort, like with the high spot, like the flips and like the twists?
I think. Well, I added to it. Sure. I think I got to be able more refined in that, but I was always flipping as a kid, anyways. So then when I went to I did high school wrestling first. And I did not want to shower with all the boys. They were like, you got to shower after the meets. And I was like, well, I'm not getting naked with a bunch of boys, it's because I'm insecure and fat. I don't want to do that. So then the diving coach was like, saw me at swim class and was like, damn, you could do a lot of flips naturally. Why don't you come to swimming? And I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And then I was just really good at it, and I could shower with my Speedo on. So, okay, that's what I'll do.
Funny how things work out like
that. Yeah. And then I mean, I had some trouble in high school later on because, long story short, a kid tried to kill me, and they ended up letting him stay in school. So I ended up developing a panic disorder. But I had sophomore year, I already got letters from Emory University down in Atlanta, just kind of saying, we'll kind of keep an eye on you. We do scholarships and all that stuff. So I could have done a lot more with that, and had it not been for the incident that happened with this kid.
Derailing you. Yeah. So when you were, who were some of your friends, like when you're doing shows at that point, who were some of the guys that, I know we all kind of look at the level of where you came in, but there were a couple. So who were some of the guys that you look back and say, well, for where I was, those were the guys I enjoyed wrestling?
Score.
Yeah.
It was the Score. The Score minus Teddy. I never really liked working Teddy because it was anytime there was a mistake in a match, it was always somebody else's fault.
Yeah.
It was just really hard to work with him back then.
And he was so reckless.
Yeah.
I remember a ladder match in Hillman Street in New Bedford where it was like a 6-person ladder match, and he was just throwing, like, people could have their backs turned, and he would just throw the ladder at him. Like, dude, even I was like 16 refereeing at the time, and even I knew, like, holy crap, dude, like, whew, you need to give these people some. And he was just reckless and like would just not take ownership for it. Like,
right.
So, but I liked working like with Dan and Brian and Pat, and really that was kind of it. Mikey B. That was kind of really it.
I mean, I know it was Limit when you were there. It was
my first like real feud, quote unquote, was with Highlight Kid and Rage, and those were awful.
Right. That was after we had left.
That was after you guys left because they brought Highlight Kid back.
Because we were Guy and Highlight Kid didn't get along or whatever. So it was such a weird time.
It was a weird time. Oh, Chris Pyro, I did like working with Chris Pyro. Mm-hmm. Brandon Webb, I liked working. Stevie Sky. So there were a couple guys. But other than that, not a lot.
Didn't you do a deal with Bobby Biggins too?
Yeah, I did. I liked working with Bobby Biggins. He was my first match was him in Vane against me and some other kid from Brockton. But yeah, I did a little thing with Bobby Biggins. Yep, that was good.
So where along the lines do you start? And with Yankee, a lot of times it was just because you were one of the guys who were. Typically, if you were passionate about what you're doing, you were involved, and you kind of advocated enough. If you care about it. But at this point, like when I was there was sort of Pete, Izzy,
mm-hmm.
Izzy Strait, and Tony the Maniac, and it was kind of like those guys. But then Ash would run a road show, so there was really kind of a few hands in the pot putting things together. And Joe Eugenio was super involved still at that point. When you were there, what was like? Obviously, Guy was doing the booking. Where was that basically if you were one of Guy's in quotes guys you were on shows otherwise? So where was it that things sort of crossed over and that you started being able to have some influence there?
Guy left and Sean Candido took over, and he had to use me only because we lost a lot of guys.
Right, that Score X, it was like 7 guys.
Yep. So I got along with Jamie, and he gave me an opportunity, and I took advantage of it. And then that's when Nick came into training, and it was Baker and Nick on
Yeah.
differing days, and Nick took me under his wing, and that was okay. Now Nick spoke up for me.
Yeah.
And now the older guys would respect Nick's opinion.
Yeah.
You know, okay, let's give him a second chance type of thing. So he spoke up for me. And then, of course, Jamie went to bat for me and used me in a better position than I had ever been used at that point.
And I find it was one of the things that stands out with kind of your tie and legacy with the local wrestling. You were bringing up Billy Robinson earlier,
Yep.
and you guys had actually set up to have Billy Robinson
Yes.
in, and was it a week later that you had to postpone it, and it was like a week later. You were going to have Billy Robinson in to run a seminar,
Yeah.
and it was like a week later or 2 weeks later that he passed.
Yeah, me and Nick had talked about it for years, because we're really into the catch wrestling and the legitimacy of it and really learning it. And I said, finally, I procrastinate. I reached out to Billy Robinson's handler, Jake Shannon, and I said, would you really like to do a seminar, but pro wrestling and just kind of how to mix the two? And he was really into it, and it was affordable. I mean, we were going to lose money on it, but not a lot, and we were psyched about it. It was something me and Nick wanted to do, and we set it up, and we start promoting it, and then he died like 3 weeks before it was supposed to happen. So it's a lesson in not waiting.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that it stood out, and for whatever reason, the date that you guys had set, I was like, it was either work or something. I couldn't do it, but if it had worked, if you had rescheduled it, happened. That was like one of the few seminars brought on. I'm like, even though I'm going. I was like, holy cow, Billy Robbins, that's fantastic.
Yeah. I always Steve Ricard will sometimes do seminars with guys that. Not that you can't learn, because you can learn something from everybody.
Right.
But he would do Luna Vachon seminars, and I'd be like, I don't know. And then I would learn something. But then he'd do we did a John Walters seminar one time, and it was awful.
Yeah.
It was not worth anything. He brought his dog, and he was in the ring. The dog was in the ring wandering around. He's like, what do you guys want to do? It was really bad.
Right.
So I guess it's a crapshoot with what you're going to get. But I've always liked guys that have a legitimate background and have... just bring something different to the table. I'm not too worried about guys that can get the guys some, it's Jeff Jarrett a producer now? I'll go to the seminar.
Right.
But before that, they weren't interested. So I've reached out to a lot of different people, and unfortunately, I reached out to Bruce Pritchard not too long ago.
Okay.
And I said he was coming into Kowloon's.
Oh, right to the show.
And I said, hey, you want to come in a day before and we'll do a seminar? I think you could offer a good backstage insight and what people are looking for and just kind of the psychology and your old school, and you've got a different perspective and a great wild perspective. And I don't know if people would take advantage of it because he wasn't with the company.
I'd sit and listen. I could for 3 hours just hearing about working with Paul Bosch. I mean, just like that,
You learn. learn.
So was he not interested? Did he not get back
he
to
said,
you?
how much are we talking?
Yeah.
And I broke down the math for him. I said, out of respect, I'm not looking to lose any money. So I think I could probably get 30 people at $50, which is $1,500. And I said, you can take, whatever after flight and hotel.
Yeah.
So you get $800 as long as I don't lose any money. Whatever, it's yours.
Right.
But I'm thinking conservatively, I could probably get 30 people at $50.
Yeah.
And it just never heard back from him, so I wasn't interested, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I made the effort, but those are the type of people I look for. And I just sent one out to another guy who I know has done a couple of things. So I'm really hoping that pulls through because he hasn't been in the area, and I think he's got a nice shoot background to him, but he also knows what they're looking for. So I'm hoping that works out.
I know one of the we had done some over the years, and some more successful than others. We didn't personally lose our butts, but we did the Steamboat and Harley race and Les Thatcher, which unfortunately another promoter told his guys, don't go, I'll bring them all in 3 months later, except not knowing that we had, as a gentleman's agreement, Harley, Les, and Ricky had let us know that none of them would do a seminar anywhere within like a 5-hour drive for a year.
Yeah.
Because we brought all three of them in. It was an investment. So because of that, a lot of people missed out. The second time we brought Ricky Steamboat back, it was in conjunction with one of his ROH appearances. we got a lot more guys.
Yep.
And that was, I mean, Ricky ran a very conventional seminar. I'm gonna warm you guys up. We're gonna run some matches. We'll talk about them. We'll do some drills. But it's Ricky Steamboat. You learned about, and he was picking apart your fire, how to be a great hot tags. So you learned a lot. I unfortunately didn't get to sit through it, but we had, as part of one of our events, we had Steve Carino do a seminar.
Yep.
Pre-show. It was and so many guys came up and said that was like the most seminar that was awesome, because everybody else's seminars were get in the ring, you're going to wrestle a match, I'm going to do a 5-minute match, I'm going to cut it down and tell you where it was good or bad. It's the Dr. Tom, which Dr. Tom does it and does it fantastic.
Yep.
And I'm not disparaging what him and Les Thatcher do on there, because that's exactly what it is. But Steve did like a classroom seminar and had guys, and he had like workbooks for guys to, and everybody walked out going, oh my God, it was like, and
it was how to carry yourself, how to market yourself, how to don't sell your own gimmicks at the gimmick table because it looked bush league. Have somebody else do it for you. You can be there, but have somebody else take the money because you look like a jobber when you're making change for a $20 bill with some like.
And one of the criticisms I got for that, this is somebody's. I go, but Carino hasn't worked for WWE or nothing.
Yeah.
He's only a road agent now.
Yep.
Was a producer for NXT and a coach. It's like it's like people get where they get for a reason. So I just thought that
problem
was cool.
I had, not problem. Because I hear a lot of times, bring a notebook to training, right? And the issue I take with that, even though I've been starting to bring a notebook to training because I forget what I do and I'm trying to write a book. But a notebook ends up being black and white, and it doesn't have room for context.
Yeah.
And context is so important in wrestling. Like I remember Bob, when I started going to Slam Tech at Bob's, back in 2004, it was cut and dry. It was black and white. It was Bob's way or the highway, and everything else was bad.
Right.
And I didn't understand it because I would say something like, in my head, I'd be like, wait a minute, I saw Ricky Steamboat do that, and Ricky Steamboat's not wrong, so what are you talking about?
Right. That Bob Evans is a different Bob Evans than we see now, for
but
sure.
But
he was a good trainer.
It
he knew
still
his stuff.
happens today because when Spike took over, one of Spike's cardinal rules were baby faces don't go to the ropes. Baby faces don't go to the ropes. They work up.
Right.
And that was so true, and I understood it. And it's very much true until it's not true.
Yeah. Until somebody finds a way to do it and get it effective, and then
it'll be effective because nobody else does it.
Right.
So it's the exception, not the rule. But because you're being taught this black and white linear thinking, you go, what? I remember I was at EPW in Plainfield. I'm sure Rich was there, and so Bob's training was very black and white, and then it was like Mike Sane and all those heaters,
Yeah.
they were heaters, not all of them, but like Mike Sane and Paul Lombardi, Jared, they were heaters at the time. And Bob was in the ring, and Bob was begging the crowd. And one of Bob's thing was, don't beg.
Right.
And they were begging, and those guys all over Bob, just you're like, I can't believe he's doing that. And I remember thinking to myself, that's your trainer. Like, how disrespectful of you to do that to him behind his back. I was so disappointed in them because there's got to be a reason. Like, so I really, when I do trainings now, the last couple of years, I've been really getting into try to explain the full context of things and don't get caught up in these rules because they're guidelines and they're good guidelines, but there's always a reason to break the rule.
Yeah,
quote unquote
absolutely.
Rule. And it is so much context, and I hate that. Like, I'll give you another example. I went to a Mike Hollow seminar 2-3 weeks ago. And it was disappointing because there was like 6 people there, and 3 of them were my guys. I made them go.
And Mike was only the head trainer of Killer Kowalski Schools for a lot of the guys who got signed.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yep. And I remembered him from Spada days, and
he was the early Chaotic head trainer. I mean, all those early guys who were in quotes Chaotic guys were Coach Hollow's guys.
So I was like, I've never met him. And I said, I definitely want to go. I went with my notebook in hand, and I picked up a couple things that I never heard. But he was doing a headlock. And he said, when you do a headlock, you want your right arm up and kind of create a hole because that's, that's how he does it. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, that's contradictory to how I learned, so I learned wing down pressure. So for the last couple of weeks, and then of course my students are there, so I'm going to have to explain to them why and what. And I always say, different flavors of ice cream, know, but it had been, in my head for the last, few weeks, and I figured it out over the week, and I said that it's the way the guy is standing. So if you do a standing side headlock, the guy is behind you like you're on railroad tracks.
Right.
Right? And you're forward. And you're standing, the pressure comes from your abdomen. You're crushing his head with your forearm and the abdomen. So yes, in that case, you would have that because the pressure's going up here. You guys can't see what I'm saying, but trust me, it makes sense. So it's coming up here. You wouldn't bring the wing back. You would pull.
Yeah.
Okay? So that makes sense. Nowadays, when you grab a headlock, you don't do a standing side headlock. You go forward, and then you guys are like a puzzle piece, mirroring each other. So it's no longer that. The head is now up here.
The position has changed.
And so if you pull, you're actually moving the head. There's no grip.
Right.
You pulled here.
You're pulling the head to your chest as opposed to your
side. There's a grip, and that's why you bring back and you put the wing down because now there's the pressure.
Right.
So I was like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, I figured it out. But it took me a week or two to kind of process that and have an answer and go, all right. And I don't even know if Mike Hollow knows it because I never talked to him about it.
Right.
And some people don't want to hear the intricacies anyways. But that's how I processed and said, all right, you know what? It makes sense. If it's a standing side headlock here, pressure comes up.
Right.
Here. But if you're doing a regular kind of standard today's version of a headlock, it would go back. And that's where it is. And I had that same thing with whipping off the rope. I really like the double whip follow through. Yeah. Like a little pull jump, show the pull jump follow through. But a lot of guys like one hand
hit hand and then the other
hand on the chest. Yeah. And so I'm going through my head for a while, and 2 o'clock in the morning one day, I figured it out. And I said, you know what? One hand, that right hand up.
On the chest,
it works because you push the guy back against the rope and the momentum springs him forward and it's a pull. The problem I have with that is that then it turns into middle of the ring, push all the way back, and don't use the momentum. Right. You just push, call the spot, and then
because some people say when you push back to not go to the ropes.
Right.
To never push back far enough to reach the ropes.
Yes.
So, obviously, I'm not a wrestler, so this is a little bit more difficult for me to convey. But you're saying the two-handed grab and pull makes more sense to me because if you're not being pushed all the way back to the ropes, then that
it's like a
motion makes more sense to me.
And then a guide through. I like the guide through, But there's other ways. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can do it, but I think people like to standardize things. But when you standardize things, then you take away from what is wrestling or what is different about wrestling and makes everybody unique. I go through this all the time. I love taking the arm drag around the neck.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times people say that's wrong. And I go, actually, that's more legit than the way you guys are doing the arm drag. Right. Just because you don't take it that way and it's not how 90% of the people do it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means people don't do it. And that's why I do it. But they're so caught up in this kind of linear thinking that it's one way and that's it. That and I go, you don't get it.
Well, when I had brought up having training with Les Thatcher, I was doing one of the drills, and when I ran the ropes, I did not run so there's two different ways you can run the ropes. Nowadays, probably way more.
You're right.
But the two ways that kind of were done were either you did it what we call consider Kowalski style. So when you hit the ropes, it's sort of your thigh and your right hip and your under your arm hit the rope, and you kind of
Jerry Lynn.
Yeah, and you kind of hit it
3 points
sideways.
of contact.
Right, and the idea being if something ever lets go, you've already kind of got yourself stabilized, and you can skin the cat out. The other way is more of a full back, but you're still hooking the ropes, you're still in control when you're hitting it, but it's full back. And one of the things that Les was like, you got to be careful hitting those ropes that way. If they ever break, you're gonna spill out. And I've been in rings where you do skin the cat back, but and I was like, well, this is what I've seen plenty of guys do it, and but I was being respectful. I said, I just have done this way at this point for like 16, 15 years or whatever. And then Harley Race comes over. He's on, with his cane. He goes, hey, Matt. He goes, big old giant bear paw. I'm like, I made a lot of money hitting the ropes the way you do.
Exactly.
So I was like, all right, okay.
Exactly.
So it is. It's exactly like, the arm drag. A lot of guys do it this way. Learn if you can. Learn them all.
Yep.
Because I can tell you, I always took arm drags. The way I had was when you come off, the guy grabs, gives you the arm, and
Yep.
But then, because I was open-minded about barrel rolling with it, kind of like I call it barrel rolling, where your arm is, when Steamboat was talking about how he Steamboat, best arm drag in the business.
Yes.
When he was talking about how he did it, Kyle, the first time he did the arm hooks, and he didn't get that Savage look to it, where Savage, boom. Now, provided I'm not nearly the athlete that Randy Savage ever was, and I don't take great flip bumps over the top, but because I took it the way Steamboat was used to, rather than that, they looked just lower. They weren't high in the, but I took Steamboat arm drags and they looked like Steamboat arm drags because it was arm across his chest, neck, boom.
Yep.
So I just learn. If you have guys, keep an open mind and try to learn what's.
And that's what I say.
Yeah,
absolutely. And the ropes comes up too, because I was taught both ways, and I prefer try to hit it with my hips, but in a match, mid-match, I'm not thinking about that. I'm going to hit it however it comes up. As long as I'm not stumbling over my feet or causing anybody else to do so, I'm okay with it. But I do try to teach both ways, and if we're at training, I would like to see more hip. But Jeff Jarrett just did a seminar, and he did it with the hip in, but he didn't grab the top rope. He just left his hand there.
Okay.
And his idea was, as I like to push the top rope backwards. As he comes off, it's a push off the ropes. It's not just leaning in and using the momentum. He said, never heard it before. Jeff Jarrett made a lot of money. Yeah. There you go.
And if you watch, a lot of guys who come up from like Mike Quackenbush's Chikara program, and even like in the early days, like I know he's changed kind of how he does it, but even Cesaro was doing this when he was wrestling there. They hit the ropes. They hit flat backed, right arm up over the rim, but their lower
left.
arm, like their left arm actually is low, and they actually, if you watch, their left hand grabs that middle rope. So it almost is like making sure that you're not going to go through that way.
Right.
My left arm is up because I'm running, so it's like bent like a runner stance, but they actually straight arm it. And if you watch a lot of them do their dives, it's like they go that, or they get shut off. That left arm is like straight, and it's grabbing that middle rope that way. So, again, Mike Quackenbush, he's trained a ton of guys. He's been brought to the Performance Center to be a coach. So, again, as you said, many different flavors of ice cream. I used to say different flavors of vanilla because it's all one ice cream. It's all pro wrestling, but it's. So I think that's interesting. Like, you don't like because it's black and white. So you kind of so when you're doing trainings or whatever, you probably do a lot of like bullet points that you want to hit on. But
it has, it depends. I do have a tendency sometimes to talk a lot, and I understand that the guys aren't going to get it right away.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to be in the position I was in, which was, wait a minute, but I want to try to cover, look, this might come up, this might come up, this come up. Somebody might say this, somebody might say that. And I want you to be aware of it and hit home that it's different flavors of the first seminar I ever did was with Jamie Noble. It was at Top Rope. And the first thing he said was, I can't tell you what's wrong, but I can tell you what's right. And I was like, that is amazing. I still use that today. Like,
that's awesome.
Look, I'm not going to say what you're doing is wrong. I'm just going to teach you the way I know is right.
Yeah.
Meaning, hey, man, there's a lot of different ways to wrestle.
What a great philosophy.
It is.
Really
It really is.
And again, now he's another guy who's still, he's got a job, and he's got a lot of responsibilities backstage now.
I have, like, certain regrets. What time is it?
We're running low on time.
Oh, my God. We
haven't even talked about where you've so you've gone on the list of we're having you back sometime very soon.
Yep.
But go.
Oh, I'm sorry. No. So there was like always some like regrets. I'm sad. I regret that I didn't go to Bob's when the score did. Like that's one of my regrets. I regret not going out or whatever. But one of the regrets with Jamie Noble is when he came and did the seminar, he really seemed to take a liking to me. At the time, I kind of looked like him, and I was in decent shape, and I could go. And I kicked myself in the butt that I never followed up because of my panic disorder and social anxiety disorder and all that stuff. So, like, man, there's always been some sort of opportunities for me to follow up, and I don't want to come off as a mark, and I don't want. Last night, were you at when I wrestled Tommy Dreamer? Were you there at the PAL?
I don't think I had come back yet.
Oh, this was like last year. Okay, so I wrestled Tommy Dreamer last year at the PAL, and I was miserable to do the match, and not because it was nothing to do with Dreamer, obviously, but I hated being the guy that just got placed into things. Like that's where I used to place like Johnny Angel and Mike Foster with the star because it's just going to be a star match. So I was like, wow, is that who I am now? I feel like I'm a little better than this. So I went there kind of with a chip on my shoulder, and it seemed like Tommy kind of wanted to talk about the match, but I was just kind of like, not blew him off, but I was like, all right, what, I was like, okay, I'll do work the arm, okay, whatever. And I just kind of ignored everybody the rest of the night. And we go out there and we have the match, and it was a fine match, and it was very smooth and easy, right? And I come back and Tommy didn't say anything, and everybody seemed to like it, but Tommy didn't say anything. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe he didn't really care for it, or maybe I'm a jerk or whatever. Last night, we're talking, we're all together because, I had to help put the match together. And Tommy says to Spike, he goes, you train this guy? And Spike goes, yeah, I refined him. He was trained before, but I refined him. He goes like, we worked last year, and I tell you, man, we went out there, and like I was really surprised. I just thought he was going to be some indie guy, and we went out there and we had fun. We really didn't call anything. I was really, really, really surprised. He's very good. And Spike's like, yeah, man, he can go. And I was like, why didn't you tell me that last year? And then so like in my head, I'm like, okay, follow up with Tommy at the end of the night because he books a lot. He does a lot of things, and he's good friends with Taven, and he knows the kingdom, and like I could drop some names and really just try to make some forward progress. And I didn't do it out of fear, and it's so crazy.
That's a shame, man.
It is. Yeah. It really is.
I honestly, I think people will look back, not just you, that other people who are around you, and will think that's a shame because of how good you are. Like, is that you've just missed so many opportunities because you couldn't get out of your own way.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
because you're dope, dude. Like, and you never truly believed that, but if you did, you never communicated that in the right way. So that
Yeah,
just
I just
get the hell out of your own way for a change, man.
And that was always like when we were talking about names of the guys we wanted to use. Like we had for a little bit, we had you come in and work a tag when you were doing the stroke, like temporarily. We had you guys, and there was always something that came up. Whether you had something that went down, like you've talked about, where you weren't afraid to voice things, and it would rub people the wrong way, and they might be one of our guys who was a more regular guy, whatever. Yep. But it was always like, well, what about Drew? He can come in, like when we were doing like the Lightning Cup stuff. No, trust me. And then you'd come in and you do like these, holy cow, did you see, these great, just like unexpected stuff for who you were, for what you did, because I didn't see a lot of it then. And you'd come in and always produced, but then it would just be like you said, something like that would come up, and
bad attitude, and I had to talk last night with Channing Thomas, and he's like, I thought you hated me. And it's funny because Rich Bass was like, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, and I'm like, I just don't go out of my way to placate people. I can't. I'm not good at small talk. I've never been. So I kind of stay to myself. I stick to the guys I know and can talk to, and then I've always looked miserable. I've always looked like I have a miserable face on, but half the time it's not that I'm miserable. It's I don't know how to talk to people.
Yeah, the resting bitch face before it was before it was cool to have resting bitch face.
And I've tried to get over it.
He was, when he was 16, he was writing a letter about what resting bitch face would be.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, hey, we all have our egos, right?
I'll tell you, we have epically, me as the host, I have epically failed in moving anywhere at all through this conversation as far as the timelines.
I really wanted to get into our old heat of the week.
It's been
see if we could pick that apart, because that was always fun.
But we're going. We're wrapping up. We've got like a few minutes left of the show, and
that's ridiculous.
I know, right? We started a few minutes late because of tech, but not nearly enough. It's just been such a good conversation. But what that just means is we'll have to like figure out where we end off, and we've kind of talked a little about you being the wrestler, a little bit about being the trainer, but I mean, there's a lot of guys now that the way the school looks is completely changed with what the Yankee school looked like versus when it was Spike's lockdown, then you with Spike's lockdown, now your lockdown. We definitely had brought up lockdown. That's natural with the Brandon Lock thing. I've always said lockdown, and but the lockup, and that
was the heat of the week with Brandon.
It was absolutely. I know exactly when it was. Yeah, it hit me as soon as
too many brain cells lost on my end, fellas. Because,
but no, I mean now in thinking about the kingdom, the Matt Taven's kingdom. So it's TK O'Ryan, Vinny Marseglia, Matt Taven. With the exception of TK, it was Vinny and Matt were wrestling other places before they kind of went under your learning tree. And, I remember I always joke with Vinny when I talked to him about, well, you've come a long way. He was in Japan recently. I'm like, long way from Confreda Gardens, isn't it? When he was wrestling in like a broken down boxing ring with Angel the Icon. And he's always, we'd go to shows and Angel would come in and we'd be like, that's your trainer.
Yes,
he's like, shut
I
up,
remember that.
shut
Yes.
up. And
Seekonk.
and now he's, he's a guy who is, main evented in Japan. Matt Taven, again, he was another guy who you just, when you're in Fairhaven, seeing the kid looked like $1 million, you could see he was athletic, and it's just like, all right, somebody just needs to feed him a clue.
Yeah.
And, once he did that, it was like, I actually, before he started training with you, he went to, Anthony Stone had a Mike Quackenbush seminar.
Yep.
And I went to hang out and watch the seminar, and he was in there, and it was like, you could see he was getting it, but he was still reckless. And when I say reckless, not like he was putting his body at risk, but it seemed like the things he was doing weren't protecting guys, and that's definitely not him anymore.
Right, sure.
I mean, he just needed somebody to work with, and to see just how that changed around. And then TK, he was one of your guys from the bottom up. But even like I remember seeing him at a Power League show. I think you may have wrestled him at Power League. I'm like, all right, that kid's going to be good. You could just tell. And then he's working with Bob, and you could just see all of a sudden he made it out there. And again, I think that's where people say he had that ego, because he did but it wasn't. I mean, he got a lot quickly, but it's because he had the talent to back it up.
Right.
So seeing those guys, so those are 3-year guys who were out there, and I think, like you said, if there was some different levels of commitment to the wrestling business, I think Nico is one of those guys who would be out there more than he is. Yep. He's definitely got the look. He's got the wrestling ability. So there's a lot that I still love to talk about. Sure. So you're gonna have to come back on an early Saturday morning, and we're gonna have to chat some more. What we should do is we should definitely have like a day where we get a few different people in here who we know are gonna be opposing personalities.
Ooh,
and
that'd be awesome.
People, not necessarily people who won't get along, but like
we're gonna bring in Sheldon Goldberg.
No, that won't happen. That won't be good for anybody.
It's funny. I was actually gonna bring up Sheldon earlier because when we were talking about the Billy Robinson thing. Around one of the Iron Eights, we were talking about he and I had actually started the work of we were going to bring in Gary Hart. If you're not a longtime wrestling fan, I'm not talking about politician Gary Hart. I'm talking about the Texas wrestling legend Gary Hart. His son was wrestling, Chad Hart, and what we were going to do is bring Gary in and bring his kid in, put his kid in the Iron Eight, and then have Gary. And he just put out the book, which is like, to me, it's like a pro wrestling Bible. It's amazing.
Such a good book.
And he ended up having a massive heart attack like less than a month later.
Wow.
It was just one of those, if timing had been different. And Gary's like one of my all-time favorite booker/matchmakers. Like his philosophy on how you present attractions and build stars, and how you just the way his mindset was. It was very much why a lot of Texas was what it was. The style was going to be what it was. That was Fritz's style. He wanted guys to hit hard, but the way things were presented and sent out there, it was him and Ken Mantell, and they had opposing thoughts on how things happened. But really, the stuff that I liked about Texas was very much Gary's stuff, and and then he was just a great manager when he was out there with like the Great Muda, and you watch his promos on how he'd build mystique around these Abdullah the Butcher, it was cool stuff. So when's the next time people can catch I know you guys had an event last night. When's the next Top Rope show? That's
March 22nd in Brockton.
Brockton, what's the location?
The Brockton VFW Post 1046.
Oh, that's been your mainstay there, and that's so
4 years now.
I will say, while we certainly can't do calls to action, say get your tickets now, because that's not. I would say that venue always fills up, so I recommend checking them out. It's they put on a great show, a lot of great young talent, a lot of up and coming talent. Guys who were there 3 and 4 years ago are now legitimately world champions, traveling all over the world. So you don't know when the guys you see and whatever. I mean, right now, champion Cold Steel Chuck O'Neal, he's a guy who was on UFC television. I mean, he's very a legitimate fighter. You have a lot of really great talent. So you never know when the guy you see and get his autograph today is tomorrow's, NXT tag champ. I say that because this Friday night in Haverhill, we have Cold Fury 18 by Chaotic Wrestling, and they had announced that they were going to have a special guest referee for the main event, which was going to be NXT champion Tommaso Ciampa. WWE's pulling him off all his appearances right now. I guess he's got a bit of a neck injury or something, and they're trying to protect him.
Yeah, it's a bit more than a little bit of a neck injury.
Right,
yeah,
I didn't know the specifics. So
yeah, it's pretty.
I'd heard it was but they're trying to protect him and trying to give him some rest. But certainly a hell of a replacement with somebody who's just as much of a chaotic product as Tommaso was in Warbin Hansen of the War Raiders. He'll be there.
I don't think he's reffing. I got my job back.
Yeah. Right, there you go. Well, you are the king of all zebras.
Yeah,
that's right.
Don't forget also Thursday nights over at the XWA, they have those event center shows, the Thursday night throwdown shows, which are again, a lot of different personalities coming through there. So on our way out, we have been ending things with some wrestling music. This time I went a little more mainstream with something, but it's something will always stick in the fonder parts of my brain as I go back to one of the WrestleManias where a certain giant bulldozer would drink too much and dance to this song. But so on our way out, we are going to listen to Brodus Clay's theme, Somebody Call My Mama.
I think I know who you're talking about.
The Drunkosaurus.
As the Drunkosaurus, definitely.
That's great.
That's exactly what it was.
That's a T-shirt.
It almost was. There was footage. There's video footage that pops up every now and again. But as I said, Ryan, thank you for coming in today. We got to have you come back. We're gonna
absolutely.
We talk about a day where we barely scratched the surface. I mean, it was an awesome conversation, and I think some of the stories that came up were fantastic.
I think you just changed the format of the show.
Yeah, it was awesome. No, it was really good. I really enjoyed it, and that's the show's evolving, and it's definitely continues to evolve in an awesome way. So, as I said, Facebook.com/Pier6WR. You can catch us there on Twitter at Pier6WR. TopRopePromotions.com, or there's a Facebook presence as well. So look them up there if you want to follow them. And so for the high class one, we'll catch you next week. Until then, somebody call my mama.